Hello. In this video, I'm going to share a part of an idea that my training on gaining growth from deeper business relationships in the business to business world. What a part of that is that can really get under the skin of the things that matter most in any business to business relationship. And let's say that you work in sales or you work in customer success or client success, client relationship, you've got a book of business. If your role is about retaining existing work and existing relationships or growing, including account management, etc., then this might be really relevant. And what I'm going to share, as I hinted at, is a chunk of the training that I give. And the last time I gave this was just a few days ago. And this really hit home for people. And from experience, it's one of those things that becomes really practical when seen, can transform the relationships of a supplier and a client, and therefore deliver growth that both parties are thrilled with. And it's from really the key part of this, the key ideas are from a book that was now published 24 years ago in the year 2000 called The Trusted Advisor. And one of the three writers, or the main writer, was a gentleman called David Meister. And in the book that I read a few times before I really then distilled it down into things that matter to then be able to trade it into organizations, is really looking at what's called the trust equation. And in the trust equation, what the research that David Meister and his colleagues did was identify the factors that makes person B trust person A. And that's what I'm going to share now. And there were four factors, three positive ones, and one that if it's high, it has a negative impact on trust that I'll share with you right now. And you can see there's some clues on the screen here. One begins with C, one begins with R, one begins with I, and one has a two-letter acronym, which is S and O. And I'll go through each of these in turn. So the positive ones, first of all, the first one being what's called credibility. And this is the degree to which the client or customer feels that the person who is their supplier is credible in what they do, that they, have some kind of credibility. And the best way of me describing this as a headline really is when you think of the first time you walk into a doctor's office, the general practitioner's office, you will see things on the wall, certificates, and they are there to quickly demonstrate credibility. So how credible you appear to your client or customer is the first attribute that can influence or does influence the level of trust. And the second one is what's called reliability, which is more about doing the things that you say you're going to do in the time and the quality that you say you're going to do. So it's more over time, but still as an indicator of reliability that can happen even in the very first meeting. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And then the third aspect is what's called intimacy. Now, this is intimacy in the business context. And this is described as the degree to which the client or customer feels comfortable in sharing anything, in sharing whatever's really going on in their mind, their kind of like their hidden agenda, what's going on. So the degree to which they think you are credible, reliable, and their level of comfort they can say what's really going on in their mind, that they're not hiding or don't feel that they need to hide from you, has huge positive attributes towards the level of trust. And then there's this fourth one called SO, or self-orientation. And if you notice where it is on this equation, if you can remember mathematics or math, depending on where you are in the world, then you will notice that credibility, reliability, and intimacy are positive attributes. So the higher that they perceive us to be, then the higher the trust. And then self-orientation is below the line here, which means that the lower the self-orientation, the higher the level of trust. And self orientation can be described as the degree to which we have our own motives on our mind. That's what that means. The degree to which appears that we have our own motives and our own interests at mind. So those are the four factors that, based on research and everything that I've learned about in developing people over the last 25 years, has really kind of like borne this through as well. And in my previous sales career and business to business world, and everyone I've trained in that 25 years, this would kind of bear fruit as well. There's nothing in here that I think, all looks very true to me. So if you're interested in a client or customer of yours trusting, these are the four pillars or four levers that you can pull. However, there's an interesting way, if you just look at this equation, that one is far more powerful than the other. Because if you look at the way it's written, in fact, it suggests, and from the research it's borne out as true, that reducing self orientation, reducing that by 1 point, is the equivalent of increasing any one of these other three by 3 points. So if credibility goes up by, 3 points, then that's the equivalent of, in total trust terms, of self-orientation going down by 1. Therefore, if there's anywhere to put focus on, it will be about reducing self-orientation. And what I'm going to share now are some ways where that can actually come to life, because it's not as easy as it may appear. And the one thing to say is, one of the first things I do in talking with sales team or any sales teams or anyone who's involved with and responsible for growing the business with their clients and customers, then sometimes they can think that, selling is a dirty word, it's manipulative and so forth. And that's really what this is hinting at. Because in my opinion, true sales is absolutely not manipulative at all. And sustainable long-term growth can only come from satisfying the needs of the clients and customers that we have. So that's the first point to really bear in mind. And what this does in practicality is the points that you can see here. The biggest leverage point, as I've already suggested from the research that David Meister and his colleagues did, was that 1 point lower in self-orientation is the equivalent of going up 3 points in one of the credibility, reliability, and intimacy. So if there's 1 point to focus, reducing self-orientation would be it. And there's another description here, again, a reminder of self-orientation. It's in the client and customer's mind, their perception of the degree to which you're focused on yourself. How much of my focus and motives is about me. And I've got the next 3 points are ways that this can play out to reduce self-orientation. So sometimes, even with the best will in the world, that we can have our own agenda coming up in mind when we are with a client and customer. Well, I've got these targets. Well, I didn't close or convert the last one. I better get this one in order for the boss to be happy. Those thoughts, or anything else that might come into your mind about you and your own performance. And the beautiful thing that we have in our armory as human beings is that every thought that comes into our head, we do not have to listen to, do not have to pay attention to, do not have to obey. So the classic one can be, I have an ice cream thought. I don't always have to go to the freezer to go and get the ice cream or go to the store to buy some more. Or another one would be if someone drives dangerously around me, I might have the thought of giving them a piece of my mind, but thankfully, I don't always obey that thought and follow it. And the same thing, thankfully, with the ice cream thought. And we've all got thoughts that we do not act and listen to. And we can let a thought be thought. They just pass on through and they do not stick unless we think more about them. So, not listening to a thought about me, my agenda, my targets. What will the boss think? Ooh, I'm going to get the commission from this. Or everyone's going to be really happy when I get back to the office and I tell them about this. Or the next time I tell people on Slack. No, let that thought go. Because when we pay attention to that thought, we now have higher self orientation. There's something else that's vital in here too, and easily overlooked and misunderstood. It says here, not paying attention to my emotions, insecure or excited. Often, as a human, what we can do in having a meeting with a client, potential client or existing client, it's very easy for us to get excited by how things are going, and then we follow it through and we follow it through and we follow that emotion. Or we have an insecure one and we act out on that and pay attention to it. And I'm suggesting that neither of those are a good idea, to just pay attention to the emotion. Because if we are paying attention to the emotion, our focus, my focus, is now back on me, which is higher self orientation. And my suggestion is here that that does not actually help in lowering self orientation. And therefore, to the degree to which I will pay attention to my emotions, my feelings, and the thought I mentioned earlier on, means that, yeah, my self orientation is now higher, which will have a direct impact on trust, conscious or subconscious, in the client and customer's mind. And the last point here, I think, is really worth spending a little bit of time in seeing for you to ponder this one: presence. And to me, presence is one of those things that we know sounds like a really good idea, but seems either elusive or okay at times. And my suggestion here is that presence is a wonderful attribute 100% of the time. And how it plays out when we are with, either on a video call or on a phone call the old fashioned way, or face to face with the client and customer, being present to them actually has a huge impact on all of the four aspects of the trust equation. So when we are present to them, our credibility is higher. When we are present to them, the feeling that they have about our reliability and our ability to clarify and make sure that what we say yes to and what the plan is based upon any meeting that will be followed through, that clarity comes from being really present. Intimacy, remember, the intimacy here is the degree to which they can feel comfortable in telling us anything. Then, of course, being present to them disarms them massively, because there isn't an awful lot of, I don't know, us being in our shell, us being afraid, all of that, all of those shackles are out of our mind because we're not paying attention to them and we're present to what is here in front of us in the client's world. And the client feels that, often subconsciously before consciously, and then will open. And of course, being present to them and not present to my thinking and my emotions, by definition, that is the lower level of self orientation. And while this is I guess, the highlight of the starting point, what my invitation is to you right now is to notice if there's a way that you could become more present and less in your head and less concerned about the thinking that you might have, less concerned about the feelings that you might have when you are face to face, be that on video call or face to face in real life with a client. Because I guarantee you, the more present that you are, the higher the trust will be. And the more trust that they have in you is the more that they will share. And the more that they will share is more ways that you can help them. And therefore, you will grow as a business. So I hope this was helpful. If you want to know more, I am very easy to find. And there's loads of ways of bringing this to life with heaps of examples in order to illustrate the power of being present. And it's really subtle what can get in our way. Hope this has been helpful. Speak to you soon. Goodbye.